Okay, video number 2 on my journey of YouTubing. Yeah. So I watched the first video that I did about 20 some odd minutes ago. I realized that my left arm is not as defined as my right one, so I really need to do something differently as far as the gym is concerned. And also I probably need to get a tat right about here, so it looks just I have this one. I get a little bit of a close-up or so. I was in the Marine Corps for a little bit, for a decade actually, so I suppose that's a little bit more than a little bit, but I got that tattoo quite some time ago and this left arm is still bare, so I feel like I'm asymmetrical and I probably want to do something to fix that before too long. So I also noticed that I I don't understand why I don't have a dimple on the right side of my face. And the camera is always interesting with the inversion and whatnot, so I have to turn my head this way in order for you to get my good side, so to speak, if there is such a thing. But whatever, I'm here. So video number 2. So my first video I talked about fantasy books. My favorite fantasy series at the time is Cradle by Will Wright. I can't say his name correctly. It's a tongue twister to say Will White for some reason. However, this video, which is a couple minutes removed from the first, I think I should transition topics and talk about something else that I'm interested in, which would be fighting. Right? So I am a Muay Thai coach. I am not going to mention the gym that I train at because I don't know if I'll bring discredit to the people at that fine establishment, so to speak. We'll see how this journey goes, and if it does well, then maybe I may tell you where I coach. But aside from that, then I'm going to keep it as an unknown. However, coaching is quite a journey. It is a very fulfilling experience and a very frustrating experience. So I guess this time I'll talk a little bit about just martial arts. My favorite martial art is Muay Thai. I got into Thai boxing when I was 24 years old. I'm 38 right now. I am told that I look younger, so I guess that's a good thing, and I believe people are being sincere when they say it. I feel like I'm 38, 10 years in the Marine Corps, and then at this point it's 14 years of, almost 15, God. 14 going on 15 years of punching, kicking, things of that nature. So got a lot of miles on me as far as the wear and tear on my body is concerned, but blessed to still be able to do it, to do it. Let me put it like that. So teaching people how to punch, kick, knee, elbow, clinch, whatever is quite an experience. There's this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and don't quote me, but in general, it's basically that most people view doing something that takes a certain amount of skill and they downplay it. They believe that they're more capable or that they would be more proficient in this activity than they actually would be. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Presumably because two people with the names Dunning and Kruger are the ones who coined it, so to speak. However, it's very, very real. Like, I can't tell you how many people that I've heard say, yeah, the stuff in MMA is cool, but in a real fight, then I just do this, or I'd see black, or I'm aggressive. It's hilarious. I remember years ago I had this barber, and he was like, yeah, I just don't see like a really aggressive black person getting beat up by a white person. I feel like we have too much aggression, and me as a black person who was relatively aggressive, I was powerlifting at the time. I was bench pressing about 405. I was in the Marine Corps, and I just started training. I was like, yeah, there's several white people that will destroy a very aggressive black person. I could bring a couple of them in here if you like. So, there's so many thoughts out there that people have where they just feel like they'd be so much better at fighting than they are. So a couple things that I'll mention about that is, number one, most people are martially inept, period. Like, we have no idea how to use our bodies anywhere near their full capability, myself included. I'm a crew in Muay Thai, so I'm a coach in Muay Thai. There's no belt systems in Muay Thai, so to speak. In the American United Thai Boxing Association, then there's somewhat of a ranking thing, because Americans, we have to have rank in order to make ourselves feel good, right? But a crew is basically what you would consider the equivalent of a black belt to be in jiu-jitsu or taekwondo, or whatever the case may be. So there's that. But yeah, just the way people think they'll be able to handle themselves is completely false. Now, on the other side of that, I will say that there are a lot of martial arts out there, and you've heard, if you're listening to me, you've doubtless heard of countless styles that trained martial artists will say are basically worthless in a street fight. So my thought process is that just about any technique that's martial can be effective if you train it dynamically enough, right? Like with enough frequency and enough realism, so to speak. So you have things like Aikido, or you have things like Taekwondo to a certain extent. Like I can't tell you how many people I met in Taekwondo who got their black belt by the age of like 12 or 13 or 10 or something like that. And from my standpoint, they can't fight to save their lives. We get in a sparring session, I just destroy their legs, or I'll punch them in their face because they're used to keeping their hands right here, not even right here, like, I don't know, just kind of down at their sides, doing a little shoot boxing back and forth and everything, trying to come in and out, and then they get hit in the face, and it's just this look of shock and awe. It's like, oh my god, like, you hit me in the face with your hands, like, you're not supposed to do that. Like, no, it's absolutely hilarious. So there's several people who think they know how to fight, and they've been trained to fight, and they still can't fight. And then there's several people who are not trained on how to fight, and they can't fight either. And then there are those who are just aggressive and strong, and they'll do better in a regular fist fight than a lot of people who are trained. So a couple categories that I think are relevant when it comes to understanding your aptitude to do damage or be successful in a fight or a situation where it's combative, if you will. So I would say they're physical attributes, right? Size matters. I don't care who you are, what you say. I am not very tall. I'm 5'7". I'm kind of stocky. As I mentioned, I used to be a power lifter. I believe I mentioned I used to be a power lifter. So I've maintained a lot of muscle mass from those days, but I'm somewhere around 185 pounds at 5'7", mostly muscle. There's a little bit of fat there, but mostly muscle, working on getting my abs as defined as they were when I was actively competing. And yeah, no matter how good I am, if I run across somebody with a similar skill set or close to my skill set, and they're 50 to 100 pounds bigger than me, then I'm doing absolutely nothing to impact that person. Right? There's nothing I'm going to do. I'm going to get my ass beat pretty handily. I'm going to get hurt pretty badly, and that's the reason why weight classes exist. So with that being said, I think it's important to really realize and acknowledge that size matters, physical attributes matter. Now, with that being said, myself against someone who is much bigger than me and does not have a skill set at all and just panics, I have a chance. I have a pretty good chance. I've competed against people who are much bigger than me before and done quite well based off of the fact that they didn't have any type of knowledge and I did. But that being said, it's still very, very dangerous to mess around with somebody who just has you severely outmatched as far as physical attributes are concerned. So physical strength, size, speed, athleticism, all that stuff, then it plays a part. I would say that the average taekwondo guy, or I would say average jiu-jitsu guy, or average kickboxer, to be perfectly honest, you run into an altercation with a well-muscled street fighter who's very aggressive, and there's a chance that you'll get decimated based off of the fact that you don't possess those attributes. So that's one part of it. And I would say, to back that up, if you're a martial artist, then you should probably take physical fitness pretty important. I'm sorry, with the level of severity, if that makes sense. So you should lift weights, you should be strong, you should be conditioned, because if you're not, then skill only gets you so far. I would go on to say that skill is an extremely important part of it, probably the most important part as far as martial arts is concerned. So you have your physical attributes, you have your skill, which is basically just your learning techniques. But it's not just your learning techniques, it's your ability to apply techniques, and that's where sparring comes in. So sparring, rolling, whatever the case may be for the different art that you practice. But if you do not apply your craft in a dynamic situation, then it is all but useless, because you're just going to panic. So we've all heard of fight or flight, but there's also something where people just, I guess, freeze. And so fight, flight, or freeze. Most of us, when something happens, we freeze before we decide whether to fight or flight, right? Or fight or fly. And there are some people who actually just stay in that place of being frozen, right? So for those of you who have not been hit in the face, your first instinct when you get hit in the face or shocked is you freeze, right? And then you freezing in a dynamic situation affords your opponent the opportunities to do many more damaging things to you. So I think that's probably the biggest part. That's probably the biggest reason why people who are trained martial artists, quote unquote, end up getting hurt pretty badly in some street fights, is because they've never really dynamically sparred. They may have done point karate, point taekwondo, whatever the case may be, or they're just not used to the shock factor of getting hit, of getting slammed, of getting their body pretzeled up, or whatever the case may be. So what happens, they freeze, and next thing you know, then they are in a place where they're incapacitated, unable to defend themselves, and they feel like what they learned doesn't work. And it's not necessarily because it doesn't work, it's because you haven't practiced it in a realistic scenario to where you can be conditioned and you have those synapses that are going to fire quickly enough in order for you to respond appropriately. So we have physical attributes, we have skill, and then we have aggression. Now, I kind of touched on aggression before, but I want to make sure that I delineate. Physical attributes is not aggression, right? So I can be 200 pounds of twisted steel, so to speak, and not be aggressive. So I can have the ability physically to enact a certain will, if you will, with my body. But if I don't have the aggression in order to do so, then it can be a waste for that particular scenario. And aggression is where competition really comes in. Like, skill comes into competition a lot as well, as far as attributes are concerned. Specifically, when you look at high level matches and in MMA, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, whatever, then you're looking at athletes who are pretty well refined, right? So yeah, you'll run across some people who are strong for the weight class, or some people who are quicker, or whatever the case may be. But in general, the physical attributes are pretty comparable. Whereas when you look at aggression, then aggression, like that, there is such a spectrum. And there's here where it's just like, okay, this person is very, very methodical. They don't really explode much. They're not aggressive fighters. They're just kind of there. They just go with it. They can be clinicians, tacticians, whatever the case may be. And then you have the people over here who they're brawlers. They just go, right? And typically brawlers have a decent amount of success because they're able to overwhelm their opponent. So I'm pretty sure you've heard it said that the tougher guy usually wins a fight, and that's accurate in the sense that the tougher guy is the person who's usually more aggressive. So I can know 1,000 techniques and I can execute them flawlessly, but if you violently execute your action faster than me and with more force, then there's a good chance that I'll end up losing that exchange based off of the fact that I was more tentative or hesitant, or whatever the case may be. So I think the goal that you should have when you're in combat situations is to be able to mix those mix those elements, right? You want to have physical attributes. You want to be strong enough to have power behind your techniques, right? And I understand, like, executing techniques a certain way gives you power, so to speak. Knockout power doesn't come from what's in my arm. Knockout power comes from me rotating my core and, being able to put the momentum of my body behind my strike. However, me having arms that weigh 25 pounds as opposed to arms that weigh 10 pounds, probably it makes a difference, right? So having those physical attributes to where you have that explosive power, to where you have the strength, and the resiliency in your body in order to have some weight behind your movements, then that's helpful. And then obviously you want to have the skill. You want to have the skill, but you want to have the practice associated with having developed that skill as well. So the hours, the repetitions that you need in order to be proficient in executing that, and to notice when something's coming at you, and to just have kind of muscle memory, as far as like, okay, if I slip this way, then my default response is going to be to come back over with a cross, or if I fade back, then I'll come with a low kick or high kick, whatever the case may be. And then you want to have that aggression, and that aggression is something where I think that I like myself, I'm not necessarily an aggressive fighter, if you will, but there are moments of aggression. So in general, I'm a counter fighter, which is hilarious because I'm 5'7", right? So I'm not a tall guy. Usually when usually when you think counter fighters, then they're these long, lanky guys who can sit back and keep you at range, and they just out, and and I do it, but I'm short, so it's quite funny. I'll just dodge slip punches and then come back with something. I'm elusive, and then as I get more and more serious, so to speak, then I end up just countering, so kind of like stopping my opponent in the middle of their techniques, and I enjoy doing that quite a bit. But with that being said, even with me predominantly being a counter striker, then there are moments when I understand I need to be aggressive. And I think as a fighter you need to understand when to be aggressive and when not to be aggressive. There are certain moments when it's just like, okay, now's the time, go. And you step on the gas and you accelerate for a little bit, you do the damage that you can do, and maybe it's enough damage to end it, maybe it's not. If it is, then great for you. If it's not, then you back out and you reassess on the level of damage, what the impact was, and what gave you that opportunity. So that's where coaching comes in a lot, and that's where experience comes in. But in general, those are the elements that I'm aware of as far as what comprises a good fighter. So you want to have physical attributes. Weight classes exist for a reason. Trust me. There are people out there that, hey, I'm better than, and they will murder me because they're bigger. And there's people, like specifically jiu-jitsu, that are much more skilled than I am, and I will smash them because I'm bigger and stronger, right? So so weight classes exist for a reason, but physical attributes are still important no matter what size you are. Your level of skill is extremely important, probably the most important thing when you talk about being a practicing martial artist. And then your level of aggression, and understanding when and how to use it, and also understanding how to deal with aggression as well. If you can get those three things, then you can be a decent fighter. By no means do I consider myself to be great. I think I am good to very good at Muay Thai and kickboxing. As far as jiu-jitsu is concerned, I average to a bit above average or so. And then wrestling, judo, boxing, all those ancillary things that I did along my journey as an MMA fighter, then who knows? Alright, but for those of you who are interested in fighting, then that's my take on it. And I understand the lighting has significantly changed. I guess the shadow has come over or something. So I'll go ahead and end this, but hope you enjoyed it. We'll have more topics coming up. This was fighting. The first one was on a fantasy book. I also have a fragrance collection. I probably have about 117 bottles or so. So I'll talk a little bit about cologne as well, because that's near and dear to my heart. We have topics on dance coming up, and we will have some topics probably on dating and just the dynamics between genders, maybe. Although I'm not sure I really want to touch on that. I'm not monetized, and getting demonetized without being monetized is probably not something that I'm open to experiencing. But we'll see. So, catch you later.